Facebook Live. We are just starting. I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds for people that might have set reminders and logged on to join us. But welcome to the BPS's How Did You Get That Job in our monthly catch-up, finding out about someone's career journey. I hope everyone is well and having a good Tuesday. Welcome to this evening's How Did You Get That Job in session for November. So my name is James Goodwin, and I'm the Careers Manager with the British Psychological Society. I'm going to be hosting our chat this evening, and our live chat is the 7th in our series of speakers, where we are bringing you speakers talking about their career to date and how they entered into their career, and talking a little bit about their career pathway. Now, you might have attended some of our previous sessions where we've shown lots of different career pathways that exist within psychology. So we've had speakers from IAP services covering diverse roles such as sports psychology, the wider psychological workforce. And our last event that was in September, we were joined by Sally Ann Poyser, who talked about her role as Workforce Development Lead in an IAP service. Now, with these sessions, one of the key things we want to do is to showcase the many different career pathways that exist within psychology and show how our speakers are applying psychology in a broad range of careers. We want to really make sure we show that everyone's career pathway into psychology will look different in regards to the qualifications and the experience they have. And this is something that within my role sits really importantly across all of the work that I do. So this evening, I'm really pleased to be joined by Dr Margo Ononaiye. Now, Margo, if you would like to just introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, first of all, James, for inviting me today. And even though I can't see you all out there in the virtual world, hello and thank you for coming along tonight. And as James said, my name is Margo and I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm the first female Black program director on a doctorate program in clinical psychologist. And I'm also the widening participation lead for the psychological professions Southeast.
Lovely. Thank you, Margo. Lovely to meet you. And thank you very much, firstly, for coming along this evening and talking to me and to our audience. No problem. So before we delve into questions from that introduction, Margo, there's a lot, I think, there that I'm looking forward to learning about your career journey. But before we go into questions, I just wanted to let our audience know that if you've been to these before, you'll know they're relatively informal events. So we'll begin by having a chat around Margo's career to date. But what really makes these sessions useful is if you're listening and you have got questions that you would like me to put to Margo, please don't be shy. Please do put those in the chat. Our team will be keeping an eye on what's happening in the chat, and any questions that do come up, I will put those to Margo for you. Now, if we do have lots of questions, I know sometimes our speakers can be really popular. I'll do my best to answer as many or put as many to our speaker as possible, but I'll try my best to get those, but we can't guarantee I'll ask every single one. As this is a live event as well, we will be recording it, so if there's anything you do miss, any bits of advice you pick up, please do come back and rewatch this as well. So remember to keep asking your questions, but let's make a start, really. So, Margo, firstly, I don't know if you could start off by just telling me a little bit or describing your career journey to date for our audience, please.
So I left school at 16, and for me, I was brought up in a working class family. Money was tight, and for me, when I left school at 16, I just wanted to earn some money and travel. So I did the equivalent of what in this day and age is called an apprenticeship, but in my time it was called a YTS. And I did a youth training scheme in travel and tourism. And I really enjoyed that career. And I worked my way up very slowly in that career until my mid to late 20s, when I realised that things were changing in the travel industry. I sound really old when I say this, but the internet was coming to the fore, and it looked very obvious to me that the way people booked holidays was going to change. And I realised my passion and interest was more in human nature and people, as well as developing my team rather than meeting the sales targets. So I decided I would first of all teach travel and tourism. I thought teaching was for me, and I did a certificate in education. Bearing in mind I had no A levels and I had a few O levels, so I suppose that I wanted to give a message of hope out there that you can change your mind and change career within the psychological professions at any point. Because I then did a teaching certificate and enjoyed it, but realised travel and tourism teaching wasn't for me. And then by pure chance found out that I had enough CAT points to go to university. And so I could have gone anyway at that point. I didn't know what I wanted to study, but knew that human nature was what I was interested in. And so just rang up the University of East London to see what was available for me and ended up at the psychology department. And I thought, human nature, this could work for me. And so I started a degree in psychology. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I was just like a sponge learning. It was just, everything to me was just like, oh, not thought of that, not thought about, oh, that's amazing. So I wanted to keep going. So after my degree, I decided to do a doctorate. But again, I had to, throughout my degree work, because I didn't have any access to any additional funds. So I worked my way through my degree and I had to work my way through my PhD. I did secure some funding along the way, but I was lucky with my teaching certificate and my travel and tourism that I could work either on Saturdays in travel agencies or teach, which I did both. And then after my PhD, which was clinically focused, I then was at a crossroads and thought, well, like the natural path is researcher or lecturer. But then I heard about clinical psychology and I thought, this is probably what I'm looking for. This is my interest. So for those of you out there who've tried and applied on courses before, I would always say keep going and keep applying because you never know when you're successful. And I trained at the University of Sheffield. And then from that, I came out 12 years later, I would say, out of academia. I went in the travel agent, came out clinical psychologist. And I don't know how that happened, but it did. And I'm a great believer in fate. And what happened, I suppose, then moving on, I knew academia was my thing. I started to make career choices within the profession to become a program director.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Margo. That was really insightful to see those different steps that you took and those different roles that you took in terms of those areas. That was...
Oh. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah, sorry.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Sorry, I possibly have interrupted you there, so do carry on.
I didn't know how much time we had. So if people are interested about how you become working on a program, I started off in adult mental health and did some work in child and families as well, and was always looking for strategic career moves because I wanted to teach. And I started off teaching on First Wave IAT years and years ago now at Salomons. And I worked a little bit onto the program offering research supervision and clinical psychology. And from there, an opportunity came up in the east of England to be a senior clinical tutor. And I applied and I got it. Then was promoted to clinical director, moved over to Southampton, partly because my family was in Southampton at the time, I was very ill, so I wanted to be near my family. And then was delighted to be program director back in November 2020 now, which was challenging itself.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you for that. It's really interesting as well. I liked how you described as well, kind of it almost becoming a program director was starting to combine the kind of what you'd gained from your degree and your study of psychology with that passion for teaching as well. So that married together, that's really interesting. What can I ask you? You mentioned kind of that when you were studying that you got interested and into clinical psychology. Was there anything in particular that sparked that interest in clinical psychology or motivated you to look into that?
It was a conversation with my PhD supervisor about my career and which way to go. And my research was interviewing people who had social phobia, and I really wanted to help them, but knew that I couldn't. I could only listen to their stories. And indeed, it was one gentleman who is still with me today who told me about some experiences he had in the war. And he was telling me, and he told me at the end, I was the first person he told his story to. And I thought, that feels incredible. And I wish I could help him now. I wish I
Mhm.
could help him with his symptoms and what he was struggling with. And so I think it was that gentleman, as well as my PhD supervisor, who told me about the possibility that actually sparked my interest to go into clinical psychology.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's always nice to hear those stories about people that kind of inspire you and that you meet along the way in that journey. It's always really fascinating to hear that. Thank you for sharing that, Margo. That is really interesting. We touched on this already, but in terms of the work you could do in your role currently, or the roles that you have, can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing at the moment?
Certainly. So first of all, there's the programme, which
Yeah.
is the Doctorate in Clinical Psychology programme. And we have, along with other programmes, incredible increase in numbers. And so we're working as a team to provide the best training experience in the context of our numbers literally trebling from when I first took over in the post. And so my role includes a strategic overview of the programme. It includes line management responsibilities. It includes my lovely, lovely team and making sure that they're looked after and supported in their role. And it, of course, includes the trainees. So the reason why I do this job, because to see them develop and grow over the 3 years is hugely rewarding. Clinical training is a roller coaster ride, but at the end of it, the prize is really amazing for the career that you want to make of yourself within the profession. And for me, I love seeing trainees grow and develop. And then the other role that I do that I've not talked about much yet is I was appointed as the widening participation lead for the psychological professions in the southeast of England, which is a project to help the profession become more inclusive and to be more wider in consideration of the Equality Act. And so that's not only in sort of racial and cultural identity, but in other underrepresented characteristics such as disability, age, sexuality, religion, and so on and so on. And that's been an amazing learning experience to help the professions become much more inclusive. And that I'm seconding out a day a week to do that role.
Fantastic. Brilliant, thank you for that. And on that note, we've actually had a question come in from Imogen actually around some of that. So Imogen says that they're an undergraduate placement student in Warwickshire educational psychology service at the moment. And Imogen's really interested in equality, diversity, inclusion work and how psychology can be more encouraging. So from your experience and your work with that group, is there anything you can share in terms of the kind of what's happening within psychology around that at the moment?
It really feels like, in the first time in many, many years for me personally, that the profession is really trying to change the look of the profession so it represents the people they're looking to help and treat.
Yeah.
The momentum's definitely there. So there's been initiatives such as mentoring to help people access the profession and give them support and guidance that I would have loved, because I had no idea about how to write my application form or what they were looking for at interview, through to reviewing our questions, even our entry criteria. This isn't just clinical psychology, sorry, the entry criteria, ensuring mixed panels, because it's really important that the panels for the interviewers, because there's interviewing has a huge amount of biases in it, and we do recruit like our own like. So to have those mixed panels to do the training to ensure that people are aware of their own biases is really important. There's also quite a lot of work around about supporting people within their roles and recognizing their own unique and individual kind of needs to make them successful, and looking at barriers to help people progress within their roles as well. Because it's one thing about getting into training or getting into a role, but also supporting that person within role. There's so much, and that's the work that Tessa's my research assistant who's with us tonight, and we're really looking at bringing it all together so that we can showcase the good work. But and the other thing I really must give a shout out to are to those individuals who I've had the pleasure to meet, who are actually doing work in their own time for the better of the psychological professions, different support groups out there on different mediums to help people. And it's amazing at the work they're doing. And I was talking to the Psychological Professions Network the other day saying we need to support those people because they need help as well. So I offered my supervision time for free to one of those groups to help them, because I believe in giving back, into helping them. So there's a lot being done, and a great question, Imogen, but definitely more to be done.
Yeah, Fantastic, thank you. You summarised that lovely, Margot. I think that's like you said, it's great to see that work being done. And I think from a BPS perspective, there is, like you said, it does feel really positive that there is that want to address those concerns in those areas and work done. So yeah, so watch this space, I think, for everyone.
Absolutely.
But yeah, really, really great answer. Thank you for that, and a really great question, Imogen, as well. So I know we've got a couple of questions coming in around kind of specifically kind of your PhD, your experience in terms of that. So were there any factors that made you want to pursue a PhD straight away after your undergraduate degree?
Yeah, it was twofold, really. One, I really wanted to become a doctor. And two, I loved learning and I wasn't done with it after my
Yeah,
degree. I think particularly when you make that decision later in your late 20s, I just wanted to maximize it. So that was really the two main drivers, was that I still had more learning to do.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a common theme we tend to see, that from people that go on to further studies, that, and it's really important, I think, to have it there, to have that want to learn, to take on that new knowledge as well, I think is really important. So thank you for that, for sharing that with us. So some really good questions coming in. So in terms of, a lot of questions we get at these events are around kind of experience that you gained. So you when you started, you talked about your work in the travel agents and how that progressed into teaching and your motivations there. But in terms of getting into the clinical psychology world, was there any particular bits of experience that were particularly useful in terms of making you decide that was the right option for you and then helping you on that journey as such?
I think yes is definitely the answer. And I think, first of all, we always have to think about our transferable skills. And for me, the work that I did in the travel agent, I was working with people day in, day out, often on things that were enjoyable and happy for them, but often things it wasn't always happy and enjoyable. So it's those general people skills of being able to tolerate emotion, be it happy or sad or angry, very important skills. And I put that on my form when I applied because I felt it was really important. Also, the academic skills, they definitely helped me. But what I did is I did every single academic course that the University of East London offered for free, because I recognised I need to improve my critical writing skills. I didn't know how to do a literature search, all those sorts of things. I thought, I'm not going to be on the back foot with that. I'm just going to learn
Yeah,
and do. And I think those skills, be it at degree level, which is when I did all the trainings,
yeah,
or consolidated in further education, are incredibly helpful. But also my PhD was clinically orientated. There was a clinical interview in it, which I learned the skills to do that. And I learned my limitations. And also there was just that being and hearing people's stories, as well as analysing data and questionnaires and everything else that goes along with a PhD. But there was also the Viva process when I had
yeah,
to answer questions about my PhD, and just learning those, how to defend your PhD in an appropriate way and that curiosity is okay. All those skills put together, I think, just led me, and particularly with the want to teach, just led me down that path into clinical psychology.
yeah. I think that's lots of the things you've described there are just really important. I think transferable skills are vital. It's something that I know from my career's background and perspective, hear a lot about how important they are to acknowledge that. And actually, what you've shown this evening so far, and what we try and show through these talks, is that actually no experience is bad experience. All experience, if you can demonstrate the transferability of it, you can
Absolutely.
start to show that. I think that's a really nice way of summarising it. I just noticed we've had a question from someone watching, Chelsea, in regards to what you were saying about widening participation. So if it's okay to just jump back to that.
Of course.
So Chelsea has asked, are there any resources or platforms where people can find out about those that you would particularly recommend? about opportunities?
Well, that's a great question, Chelsea, because that's part of the work that we're doing in the Psychological Professions Network Southeast, because there's so many pockets of good work being done, and yet people haven't got the mechanism to talk to one another and to hear about it. So part of what we're doing is we're creating a resource bank which will include details of those various forums, and then we will launch it on the Psychological Professions website out to all, and I'll also tweet it through my university's Twitter as well. So Chelsea, if you want it directly, just join the University of Southampton Doctorate in Clinical Psychology. Anybody out there who wants it directly, just join the Clinical Psychology Programme Twitter, and the minute it's launched, you guys will know through the Twitter account as well.
Fantastic. Brilliant. That's really helpful. I think. Thank you for sharing that resource so that people know that it's there. I think that's great. And I just seen Chelsea said thank you for that as well. So
Pleasure.
You're welcome, Chelsea. So, and another question this time from Gavin. And again, you touched on this, Margo, at the start when you were talking about your own kind of career transitions that you've been through. So Gavin says that he's says a late bloomer into psychology, so 37 going on to a conversion course. It's not first career change. How is there any advice you would say in terms of putting his experience forward if he was applying for work, say like a clinical placement or clinical doctorate? And a broader question we get from this sometimes is people worried that if they are a career changer or have had other career pathways or directions in the past, does that put them at a disadvantage?
Absolutely not.
No.
I think it's so important because part of my work with the inclusivity is to make sure that everybody's represented, no matter what age you are. I mean, I came out of clinical training a little bit older than Gavin, not too much. And so, and I like that. I'm going to have to steal that, Gavin, a late bloomer. But no, I think really think about and just take some time to reflect on what your experience has brought in relation to the core competencies of the psychological profession you're thinking of going into. So by that, I mean in communication. I'm thinking about problem solving. I'm thinking about how you would assess a situation in your particular area. I think about hands-on clinical experience, if you have it, or hands-on academic experience and what that means. And so really think about all angles of your life and think about, okay, what does that mean to me if I was to become a clinical psychologist? Why would that be useful and helpful? And then condense it down so that it's easy for the reader to read. But the BPS core competencies is a big document. But it does, for clinical psychology, for example, give you, I believe it's 9 or 10 headers that you can use to be thinking about, okay, how does my experience to date fit in with that? And where are my learning needs? Because you're going on a training course and it's absolutely right and appropriate, you have learning needs.
Fantastic advice, Margo. I think really, really great. Thank you for that, and thank you for that question, Gavin. Another question we've had about your career journey as well, Margo, is could you talk a bit about your experience as a clinician?
Of course. So when I came out of training, I went into adult mental health services because for me, I always knew it was going to be adults. It was going to be my sort of main area of clinical interest. And I worked in a really busy service and I did my further training in dialectical behavioural therapy, acronym DBT. And that enabled me to work with people who were really struggling with self-harm and suicide. And that was emotionally challenging work, but I was really glad to have the model to shape how you work in that area. Also, I enjoy cognitive behavioural therapy techniques and would use that in my clinical work, but also in my clinical training, I specialise in the area of cognitive analytical therapy, acronym CAT. So I would draw on all three models in my clinical work because I think part of being a clinical psychologist is with a good formulation, which is a diagrammatic understanding of a person's presentation, drawn up collaboratively with your client. I wanted to be able to pick on a range of interventions that would really help them. And that's always how I've been in my clinical work throughout. So I worked in adult mental health services. Then when I started to work in universities, I initially accepted a post to work in CAMS. And because I really thought at that point I wanted to keep my skills in the different areas, enjoyed working with family and children, but realised for me my passion and interest lay in adult mental health. And then moving on now, I have my own thriving private practice, mainly because I need to keep my accreditation and my day job is full time, and so moved into private practice a few years ago, and so that I can see some clients that way and help them whilst also doing my day job.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Margo. That's interesting again to see that journey you've gone on through that as well. Just in regards to kind of your private practice as well, and getting into that, has that posed kind of, you said you've used it to retain your accreditation. Has that, in terms of setting that up, have you faced any challenges with that?
I think with private practice, I think sometimes people see it as a really kind of lucrative way or something like that. For me, it was always about helping people and having that avenue. Of course, I charge for my services. But for me, I've been very lucky because I am an accredited BABCP therapist. BABCP, there's so many acronyms in this, but I'm an accredited therapist for cognitive behavioural therapy. And I'm also work with Bupa, I have actually no problems. I have a regular stream of clients. And I think as well with my ethnic identity as well, people seek me out because they want to see a therapist sometimes who can understand things that may have happened from their own cultural perspective. So I'm truly honoured to do work across different cultures, across different mental health presentations, and I've met wonderful people and hopefully help them to manage their emotional well-being in a way that really helps them to move forward in their lives.
No, fantastic. That sounds really good, and again, really fulfilling. I think from the work you do and contributing to that to the profession as well. I suppose just in terms of picking that up, we've mentioned kind of some of the challenges throughout, but in terms of your own personal challenges, I don't know if you could talk about any particular challenges you faced in your career to date and how you maybe went about overcoming those.
I think the one that I've written about, and there's several blogs out there, if anybody's interested, just Google my name, they will come up, is there is one major obstacle, which is one around racism and progression within the profession and some of the challenges I've had and the way sometimes people have expectations of me or things that have been said. And it goes on, it hasn't stopped. And so I think that is a challenge, but I try to turn that challenge into a positive. So during training, I did struggle with that and was very lucky to have a very supportive trainee fellow member of the cohort who I used to sense check a lot with and just talk to because I felt comfortable with him to do that. And hopefully I offer that now to my trainees or to other people actually if they're feeling that in their roles. But I think it is a challenge ongoing, particularly when I go on calls and I'm the only face of my colour, I'm the only beautiful dreadlock woman on the call. It really is sometimes challenging for me, and particularly in the programme director space. It's an interesting place to be. But they get me, they get Margo, and I'm now in a way where I can say and help people to learn and develop and to know that we need to make those changes. But I don't say that, sometimes I need to step out of that. I need to take a break and I need to look after myself as well as I'll always step back in because to know I'm making a difference to one person in relation to their experience is why I do these things and why I try and help people to be the best version of themselves, be it in a clinical psychologist, psychology, or in their own emotional well-being.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that answer and sharing that. I think Adana had a question. Hopefully, Adana, that's answered most of your question you asked there with what Margo was sharing. But Adana asked about kind of your experiences of kind of discrimination against yourself within the profession, and you talked about how you overcome that, but also making sure that it didn't get you down. So one of the things we talk about a lot in these sessions is around that self-care within your role and what you do. Are there any tips for people that you would give or things that you do that helps with that?
I think I have people who I'm happy to talk. If we're talking about issues of racism, I have a certain group of people who I feel comfortable and safe enough to talk about, who understand, and it could be various people, and it could be just but often there is some go-to people. And it's so helpful for me just to have that space. Also, I do a lot of self-checking in. I also think, how am I doing? Do I need to go for a walk? Just go and have a cup of tea? I never respond in emotional mind. If that's one tip I can give to anybody. If somebody has offended or hurt you or angered you, take a step back, and when you're ready emotionally, respond, and then perhaps get somebody to check the response to make sure that you're responding the way that you want to be seen in a professional manner. And also just doing things outside of psychology. I think that's what the travel industry gave me. You know, the love of going for walks, the love of going on holiday, the love of going out for a drink with the girls on a Friday night, all those other things that can come that are so important. Whatever your fun things to do, you've got to make sure you do it, because this is an emotionally challenging role. And first and foremost, I look after myself, and then I can look after other people. So we're allowed to be selfish on that one within the professions.
Yeah. I think that's a lovely summary to have at the end of that. I think that is really, really good advice, and echoed across the psychology community as well. So, so thank you for sharing that as well. I can see we're getting lots more questions coming in, so I'm just going to have a quick look. In terms of that, I think you've given some really good advice. We've had a couple of questions about dealing with particularly service users that might be quite challenging, dealing with quite sensitive cases, and how you deal with those. And I think you probably touched upon that in your last answer as well, in terms of being kind to yourself, really.
I think as well, and it depends on what challenging means for you, but I would definitely say go to your supervisor and talk about it, or whoever is in your service. Don't keep it inside and bottle it up. And if you can't talk within your service, appropriate levels of confidentiality, of course, but talk to somebody about how you're feeling so that you get the support and help that you need, because we don't have to carry that. From an emotional well-being perspective, it's not good that we carry any of that psychological pain. We need to make sure that we've processed that ourselves. And things hit us for all sorts of reasons, all sorts of ways, but making sure we have our support system around us and we have somebody to go and talk to is so important.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, and that is fantastic advice. We've got a couple of questions in now as well about, obviously you went through have worked in several different areas in terms of kind of career change, and a couple of possibly, I think it might be students and graduates that are just coming to the end of their courses and they're a bit unsure of what to do. I suppose from your looking at your career, if you were talking to those people now, is there any advice you would give about someone that might be a bit unsure of what direction to take in their career?
I think there's no rush. I mean, the lovely thing about the way the system's set up is that you can take your time. I would do your research. So if the potential careers you're interested in have open days or events like that, go along and see what they're about. If they have mentoring schemes that are appropriate for you to join them. Ask around, does anybody know a clinical psychologist or a counselling psychologist, or whoever it is that you're interested in, to talk to them about their career. And don't be afraid to contact programs sometimes as well, because they'll be, even if they don't have that within them, they may have say, well, look at this website. This will give you all the information you want to know. Oh, this is happening. Why don't you try that? Somebody emailed in the other day and I said, oh, your time is perfect. We've got our open event in December. And so they can come along and ask their questions that way. So be curious and go out and ask. The worst that can happen is somebody doesn't reply. But the best that can happen is you may get some advice and information. Now, for me, that comment that my supervisor said of, what about clinical psychology? I wouldn't have got that comment. I probably wouldn't be a clinical psychologist today if I hadn't asked his advice.
Yeah, no, really useful. Thank you for that. Another question that I have is in terms of kind of thinking about going from the start of your career to where you are now, and just thinking about, obviously, when you said you knew you wanted to get into kind of course leadership, where do you see your career going in the future?
It's interesting because I think we're all at crossroads wherever we are in our career, aren't we? And for me, I always thought it was program director. That's it. I've made it. And in many ways, I do smile at myself and say, well done, Margo, quite often, because against all the odds, I am a program director on a fabulous program. But yeah, I think the additional work I do in the Widening Participation Network really has opened my eyes into the work that needs to be done within the workforce planning, within supporting staff teams. And so I think for me, it will be looking at further kind of secondment opportunities, keeping my core profession within the program, but looking at further secondment opportunities to help what I've learned be shared where people want to hear and listen. And I suspect that's where my career will go. But you never know. There could be all sorts of opportunities around the corner. But I'm very lucky to be very happy where I am at the moment.
Yeah, no, and that obviously comes across speaking to you, your passion, your motivation for those different areas you work in, but also that advice of sometimes just being really open to opportunities when they come up and going into things with an open mind. It sounds like you've done that at a few different junctions in your career journey as well. I think picking up from what you were saying as well.
Definitely.
We've had another good question come in from Chet as well, who is saying it's been really informative to listen to what you said, but talking about this sense of imposter syndrome, and this is something we get asked a lot about students of psychology, those that are early in their careers. Is imposter syndrome something that you've personally felt, and have you got any advice for people maybe in terms of overcoming that as well?
So for me, I'm sorry, Chet, but I've never experienced it. But there's a reason why. And that's because I've always had confidence in myself that whatever career decision I made is the right one in the moment for me. Whether I change my mind later, that's another story. And I think have confidence in who you are, what skills you have, and trust in the process. Because if you are right, you will be interviewed for or successful in getting onto whatever program it is you want to do within the professions, and then you will attend a training program, possibly develop your skill, fine-tune your art, and then you come out the other side. But of course, I've seen over the years of working in education, I've seen lots of people suffer with imposter syndrome. And so my advice would be is know it's there, but remind yourself of your strengths and remember you where you are on merit, on nothing else. It's not a fluke. It's merit. If life was a fluke, I'd probably be the prime minister. I don't know why I went there, but we have to really believe in ourselves, because then the imposter syndrome will ease, and hopefully just go and sit back and be useful for when we need it to come forward to make us better version of what we want to be professionally. But for me, have confidence in who you are.
Yeah, no, I think that is really good advice, and actually having that flexibility, some of the skills you mentioned, even if it doesn't go to plan, look at what can come from that. And I can see quite a few people are reacting to that. We've had a good question from Alex as well in terms of your clinical psychology experience, and just was it in terms of going into that role, was there anything about the role as clinical psychologist that particularly surprised you? So anything that you didn't think would be part of the role or that challenged you in that role?
When I first started training, everything surprised me. I was really quite naive from a particularly clinical perspective. And so for me, learning that people struggled so much with their emotions that they would harm themselves in some shape or format I'd been very lucky, had not been in my sphere of friendships and experience to date. And I would love to go back to me in the first year of training, because I think my mouth was probably at a gasp a lot of time going, what? You do what? This is what we do. Because I had the core idea of the profession, but I don't think I had an insight into how challenging life can be and the cards that some people are dealt in their life and how they deal those cards is, gosh, incredible sometimes. And so for me, that took me a while to work through and understand. And I think it's kind of quite interesting that I ended up working and specialising in that area post-qualification. And I think another surprise for me is the variety of the role. Because what is so lovely about clinical psychologists is you can come out and do so many things with it, that it's such a great professional training. I can only speak on clinical psychology on this part, but it's such a great professional training that you can go to work with clients or whichever client group you're interested in. You could go into neuropsychology, you could go into teaching, you can go into research, you could go into policy level, you could go into media, you could do all sorts of things. And I think that is one thing that surprised me about the role, is it opens so many doors.
Yeah. No, and that's really nice to hear that. And I think that is something about psychology more generally as well, that it is within each role, although there's these defined roles within the chartered professions, there is so much scope in those to work with different people. I mean, using your examples that you've mentioned, we had a sport and exercise psychologist on a few months ago, that had actually used dance in her practice. Like, I've never thought I'd use dance in that. It's just really nice to see all those different bits. And I suppose from a personal perspective, in terms of your motivation, that can actually keep you quite motivated in your job as well. So I'm just having a look through. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. We're getting lots of appreciative feedback for your advice, Margo. It's coming some really nice comments. Hopefully you'll get a chance to have a look back on those. Just in regards to your PhD, I think we've got a question in terms of choosing your topic that you were interested in. Would there be any advice you would give to people in terms of choosing a topic around a PhD or an area to study or specialise in?
Definitely. I think with a PhD, it's 3 to 4 years long. So you want to make sure that you like the topic. Now, that may be a really simple advice, but it's so important because that piece of work will be a friend on your shoulder for quite a long time. And so you really want to make sure you have a passion and interest in it, first of all. Also, then I recommend that you find a supervisor who works as you need to be supervised, because of course supervision is that we're all varying how we supervise and how we do it. And so you want to make sure the supervisor is right for you, and you want to have a look at events that universities host. There's loads of positive EDI initiatives within the universities. Look on their websites. There's lots of different targeted groups where there's different funded opportunities. So do take your time and look on those websites to see what they have. And I loved my PhD. I really did. I loved that I think because I'd been responsible for so many people before in a travel agency career, I just loved that it was me. I was responsible for me. I was responsible for my studies. I worked closely with 2 supervisors, and it was the most fulfilling and enriching experience I have. And again, open doorways. Clinical psychology was one avenue. You have big firms really interested in how you're training and what you were doing, big corporate companies, lecturing, research. You can change topic in your research. It's various professional identities. So yes, it's definitely, I think my main advice is have a passion and enthusiasm and pick your supervisor carefully.
Brilliant. No, that's really, really good advice. I think having that, like you said, it's a long time to be studying a particular topic, so you've definitely got to have a passion and enthusiasm for that as well. I just want to go back to a question as well that was around. You mentioned at the start that funding was difficult, although you got some funding for your doctorate. Have you got any advice for people that are looking for funding, or how you went about getting that funding?
So I kept asking. So I spoke to the university and I said, I can't afford to do this on my own. What have you got? And kept asking. And I'm a great believer, and I think it's part of my upbringing, that you don't get if you don't ask. Don't be polite. I mean, be polite as you ask, but don't worry about if you've got to email a couple of people or keep on emailing the same person to get that response. And also, I did still work throughout. The funding wasn't enough to live on, so I did work throughout my PhD. But when I did secure the bigger bit of funding, that was again liaising. It was very lucky. It was with the NHS and my supervisor, and there was a fund for mature students. And so when my supervisor mentioned it, off I went to look it up, see what it was, came back, said, this is what we need to do. And I applied and I got it. And it made a difference. It absolutely made a difference. But as I say, these days, universities are advertising those opportunities that's more on the websites. So do have a look and see what's there. But also, if you do have to fund yourself, if you do decide, no, I'm going to work and fund at the same time, or you can't get those opportunities, I actually got the funding in my second year. So the first year I was lucky to get a fee free for my PhD. That was by asking. And then the second year I managed to secure the funding. So it is doable if you have to work as well. And of course, it depends on your own commitments outside of your work life. And there are now part-time routes as well for those of you who are interested. It just takes a lot longer, but it's still the same ultimate outcome at the end. So yeah, seek out opportunities, ask, go to potential funding bodies, look at charities. But as I say, universities are much better now, I would say, at advertising those opportunities on their websites.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, again, it's sometimes just about simply asking the question, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
just doing that investigative work. That's brilliant. I think, Margo, throughout this evening, you've given us some fantastic bits of advice, and lots of things people can pick up on. And I know we've had some really positive comments and some really nice, some really good replies in the chats to that advice and how useful that has been. Just as a kind of concluding question before we finish this evening, it's probably going to be a tricky one to pick, but if you had to give maybe your top tips to possibly students, graduates, people that are early in the start of their psychology career, what would those be?
First of all, I'd just like to thank everybody. I hopefully will see the comments, and it's humbling to do something like this. And so I hope you have found it helpful, because that's why I do it, just to try and help the future of the profession to know that there is hope and there is a future for you guys in the profession. I've got lots of advice. Where would I start? I think for me, it's don't worry if you don't know what you want to do yet. It will come with time. Keep curious and just keep spreading that net as wide as you can to find out about which part of the psychological professions work for you. I would also say look after yourselves within that. It's a fabulous, fabulous career, but only if we look after ourselves and our own well-being in it. And I think I'll finish with what I wrote in one of my blogs, because this is definitely my absolute advice and my fundamental values of how I work, which is never let who you are, where you come from, what you look like, your identity, your own intersectional self stop you from doing what you want to do. If one door closes, just go and open another, and then you will become who you want to become, but never let anything get in your way of that. And everybody has a different journey through that, and just look after yourself while you're doing it.
Brilliant. I don't think I can add anything to that, Margo. I think that was a lovely summary to what you said, and I think those top tips were great advice. And just adding to that, I would encourage anyone that's listening this evening. Obviously, Margo's given lots of pieces of advice. Please do go back, have a look over what we've discussed this evening. But thank you again, Margo, for giving up your time this evening to come and talk to us. It's been a real pleasure to hear your career journey, and thank you for sharing that with us as well. Very, very appreciative, and hopefully you get a chance to see some of the comments as well if you go onto our Facebook page and have a look at those, because there's hopefully some really nice comments for you there as well.
Thank you. Thank you, James, for inviting me. Thank you.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. So that concludes our How Did You Get That Job In for this evening. So thank you, everyone, for your questions. We've had a lot of questions come in this evening. So apologies, we've not been able to put all of those to Margo during the event. But hopefully you will be able to pick on some of those points and hopefully get some of the answers to the questions by watching back what's been said this evening. Thank you once again, Margo. Just to remind people, we do run the How Did You Get Your Job In events on the first Tuesday of every month. So our next How Did You Get That Job In is going to be taking place on Tuesday, the 6th of December. Same place and same time. Just log on to our Facebook page and you'll be able to join us. Our speaker next month is Dr. Audrey Tang. So Audrey is a chartered psychologist and an author with a focus on practical self-improvement. She hosts several different shows across a variety of different media, has appeared on Channel 4 and gives expert comment as a psychological spokesperson. So really looking forward to welcoming Audrey to that as well. Please, as I said at the start, this has been part of our Psychology Careers Festival, so please do. Hopefully we'll see you at some of our events throughout the rest of the week. But really all that's left for me to say now is, once again, Margo, thank you so much for your time and for sharing what you have done this evening. It's been really inspiring and insightful. And thank you to everyone for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.